6 months ago, I published my first book on Amazon, as well as created an Audible and a couple other formats as well. It was a fun journey. It took about almost 3.5 years. And in this video, I'm going to unpack the writing process, exploring, options with publishing, the pros and cons of different ways you publish it, along with actually how to market the book, edit the book, creating an audio version, creating a version on Amazon so you can print on demand, designing the cover, and everything else in between. Also, I'll break down how many books I actually sold after the first 6 months, what it cost, and what my actual profit was. So if you're interested in this, watch the whole video. There's timestamps down below if you want to skip to the end and just see kind of was it worth it for me. But let's jump right into it. Okay, let's dive into it. Self-publishing and unpacking the writing process. I know this is what we want to talk about. Now, you may look at my title, Online Church is Not the Answer, and go, well, this is a Christian book. Yes, it's a Christian book, but I will say these principles are relatable to any self-publishing process. This just happens to be the area that I'm writing in, or the genre I'm writing in, but we'll talk about that. So a little bit of overview, what I'm going to talk about. This is going to be as quick as I can, but there's a lot to this. So I'm going to talk about the book proposal and publishing options, the writing process itself, editing process, audio recording, editing process, actually creating an Audible or an Audible version on Apple Books, the design title process, getting on Amazon and other platforms, meaning like print on demand, and then also getting on Audible and other audio platforms, along with launching your book and marketing your book, which is huge. Total cost, sales, profit breakdown for the first 6 months. I published this in August, late August, and now it's February of 2025. So it's been 6 months of my book being available. And then any final tips. So let's jump right into it. First, the book proposal and publishing options. Most will say that you should start with a book proposal, that you actually should not write the whole book, because essentially, and we'll get into this, that when you publish a book, if you're going to pick a big publisher, meaning somebody's going to buy the rights to the book and so forth, an editor or like a publishing house, they want to actually shape the book. And so sometimes I was told this, and I didn't do it this way, and that's part of the reason why I probably didn't make it, but with a big publisher. But essentially they say, create a book proposal, maybe write out 1 or 2 chapters, and then you present that book proposal to a publisher. And the idea is that if they see something fully completed, they may look at your book and go, oh, like you kind of already know what you want. You're not going to want feedback. And essentially every publisher, they have to make a certain amount of money, and they're trying to fit your book into a line of other books that they may already have. And they kind of, lack of a better word, like they know more than you what will sell, and they want to control your title and where the book is. So for example, I'm writing about online church or technology in the church, and they might come to me, it's like, Jay, in your book, there's nothing about AI. Like AI is a really hot thing. And if you put AI in your title, we'll sell 3 times more books. And so these are the things you find out. I actually wrote a draft of my book, and then I went to a publisher. Again, I was told even by friends, because I did try to get published by 3 or 4 of the top Christian publishers. And I actually had some good fruit from that. But I remember friends of mine who were published by some of these publishers, they said, do not tell them that you're completely done. But I'll share more about this. I actually paid somebody to write a proposal for me. And so this was a book proposal. There's a lot of ways to do this. Every publisher will have their own kind of guidelines. Now, I'll talk about this. Technically, you can submit book proposals blind, like most publishers have like an inbox. Very rarely do you get picked up through that inbox. Most of the time you want an agent or a friend to make a connection. And so this was I paid a friend of mine $500. I only needed to pay him $250, but I ended up tipping him because I was very grateful for the help. But it just says like what the book is, links to social and so forth. They want to know if you have a following, because obviously if you have a bigger following, the more book sales. And so it's just working title, some different ideas around title. These are titles I thought of. I use ChatGPT as well to kind of come up with different ideas. 1 sentence, a summary of your book. Endorsements. This was a big thing. I actually went to people I knew and I asked if they would endorse my book prior to me writing it. And like this was a big one, getting Pastor Rick Warren to endorse it. He actually wrote a special endorsement just for one of the publishers, and then I was able to reuse that. And I actually thought this was going to get me a book deal, but it didn't. And this kind of shows like how many books you can sell. A little bit about me, comparable titles. This was something my friend did. They found other books in genre: Hybrid Church, Meta Church by Dave Adamson, a friend. He wrote endorsement for my book. And then from Social Ministry by Nora Jones. And then kind of an overview of chapters. And then you're supposed to attach a sample chapter. And ideally, you write you don't need to pick the first chapter. You just pick a strong, kind of a strong chapter. And so the idea, though, is you write out that proposal and then you give it to a publisher, and then they see if there's any potential here, and then they want to shape it. Now, I had more of it fleshed out, and that kind of hurt me. At least that's what I've been told. But ideally, you want to start with a book proposal. I find the book proposal thing, you can just you can do this yourself without even submitting it. But this really fleshes out, is there anything here? Some of us, like me, I had been doing my job as an online pastor for about 12 years. I had a strong sense of what I wanted to write. And so, typically it was a little different. This is why I knew self-publishing probably was the reality, but I did go down the journey of trying to get published. Another thing is start with a book proposal. Again, you can hire people on Fiverr or talk to friends, or you can just do it yourself. You can use the sample I provide. It's not that complicated. List out books. This is one thing. If you want to look at how to get published, what you could do is you could take books that kind of fit in your vein of like what you were writing about. So like these were all the books I could find about online ministry. And then what I did was I did the titles, I wrote out the author, here are all the publishers and the years, and then I kind of thought about the target. And then one of the things is you can see is that if you see a publisher pop up quite a bit, these are publishers that you can reach out to. So like, for example, I reached out to Zondervan, I reached out to Moody, IVP, and I reached out to one other, I'm forgetting. And essentially, though, that allows you to go, oh, look, and you might go, well, they already have a lot of books on this topic. Well, think of it on their end. They have a base that's interested in these books. And so it's really, it's pretty good sign that they're interested in your type of book. Now, you could also be saturated, and I'll talk a little about that. You could run into where they have other things committed. But list out books, and then those are publishers you might be able to go actually approach. And so ideally, you find an agent, a literary agent. There's a couple ways to do this, through searching on websites, DMing people. A lot of this happens on X and so forth now, or friends of friends. I have, I'm blessed where I have many friends that have been published by these publishers, and I just did a lot of reaching out. I remember one connection happened because I was just tweeting about writing a book, and a friend messaged me and said he's on that list of one of the books written, and in this vein, and he had a very kind conversation with me about publishing process, and he made an introduction to somebody at Zondervan, and that's just kind of how that goes. It can be a hard world to kind of figure out if you don't know anything, but this is why I benefited from being kind of a expert in my field, and I had already made a lot of relationships. So writing the book, I kind of had some momentum. And one of the things I learned was I actually, and some people would differ about this, I actually really wanted to be published by a large publisher, at least a Christian publisher, because I wanted the authority or the validation that my book is credible. Because if you self-publish, depending on how you do it, you are your worst enemy. You're the one editing it, you're the one hiring people. You're not getting a ton of pushback. Where if you go with a big publisher, they're going to have general editors. They're going to push back on your thoughts. They're going to challenge you, and it means something to be on that name. And I really wanted that, and I wanted somebody to mess around with my transcript, and challenge me on ideas and thoughts. And I had to do some extra effort to do that in my book that I published. You can still do it, but it takes a little extra work. And I contacted 4 big Christian publishers, and one of the largest ones, I went through probably, I went through probably 3 to 4 months. And essentially what I found out was you kind of, the first stage is you kind of are just sitting there to be picked. And most people never move on from that. I actually got picked because I got connected to like a general editor or editor in chief or so forth for books. And then I had an interview with that person, and I was told like I was already in the top, 95 percentile of, whatever. Like most people don't even get picked. And I got an interview with this publisher, like the general editor, that heard me out. And then it goes to a second stage where like it goes through a group of editors and people that approve, like, is this worth moving on to the next stage? And I got through that stage, if I remember right. And the third stage is that it goes to a planning stage. And essentially they would tell me it would take about, even though I had my whole manuscript done, it would take about 2.5 years for it to actually go live. Even though my writing was already done, it was because they have a bunch of books slated for every, season. And essentially they go to a committee and they kind of decide like, can we sell enough books here? Should this be on a radar? And essentially I was told that, Jay, you're not famous enough and you're not a nobody. And I was kind of stuck in the middle. And they said that they had picked another book that was kind of similar to my book. And essentially like, they couldn't publish my book. And they were very kind. I learned a lot about the process. And in the process, I did this with 2 or 3 other publishers, and some of them it was like a quick no, and some of them I went through a little bit of process. And then I realized as I got to the 4th, 5th publisher, the value of publishing with that publisher was very low. There's no longer like a need to actually go with them, and I could have explored some other options, but I found that, okay, you know what, if this person or that person, and there's really 1 or 2 publishers, if they would have said yes, I would have gone down the journey with them. But it was one of those things where self-publishing became really the best option for me very quickly because I got a hard no. And essentially publisher options, the thing is you're going to lose a little bit of control. A lot of times you don't make any money because a publisher will invest $20,000-$30,000 into your book, and you have to sell quite a few books in order to make that money back. You have to get to I'm in the understanding you have to sell 4,000 to 5,000 copies just to break even on the book, let alone make money on the book. I have many friends that never made money. They're still in the negative. They literally never made a dime off of publishing from a big publisher. Now, they got other type of credibility and respect, I think, through that, but self-publishing becoming more popular because of that. This is why what you see a lot in this space is you see like famous people will publish, or somebody will publish a book, become real famous, and then the second version is this kind of self-publish option because they can make more money per book. And I'll kind of talk about that. The other thing is you can kind of hire a small publishing group to do all this for you. You can pay anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 up front, and they will do all the editing, create an audiobook, design it, publish it. They will do all this for you and for a fee. And I remember one person actually reached out to me on X about publishing the book, and I was like, oh, cool. And I found out they were an agent of this small publishing group that people use. And what you do is you give them like $8,000 and they handle it all for you, and that you just give them a transcript. Now, this is actually not a bad option. If you have the money and resources, you can get a book out pretty easily for a small price for time, because I'll share more about how much I paid, but I paid a lot of money of my own money to do this. Now, I wouldn't have gotten an audiobook at that price and all this other stuff. You have to spend quite a bit of money. The other thing is sometimes you don't own the content. You have to be very particular. And the other thing is sometimes those groups aren't really about quality. They're about getting the product out. So I don't think that there's a lot of pushback on the product itself. Now, depending on who you go with, I think that can change. But I think a lot of times these small publishing houses are just getting content out because it's a check. Like once they get your book out, they're done. And so this is why a big publisher, it means something to be on let's say a Zondervan or a Baker Books, so whoever, Penguin, whoever you want to say. But very quickly I realized I could do a book by myself. Now I'm in this probably unique category where I'm technical and savvy enough in some of this stuff that I felt like I could grind out a book. I would have loved if one of my first 2 publishers would have said yes. It would have saved me a lot of energy. But one of the good things is now, since I self-published, I don't have to worry about inventory. I don't hold books. Amazon prints all of them on demand. And now everything I make after making back my costs is pure profit. And I was able to get to that pretty quickly. So that's a little bit about the book proposal and publishing options. Now, let's talk about the writing process. Now, I'm somebody that writes, like, and I'll show you, I have a blog. And if I go back in time, I've been writing since I think one of my first blog posts about this is all the way back, all the way back in 2013. So I think this started as a actual blogger site, and then it became a Squarespace site. But I've been writing for a long time, and I bring that up because sometimes even learning how to write can be a really hard process. There was a book that somebody recommended, How to Write a Book, and it was a really interesting book. Oh man, I can't remember the actual the name of it, but it was like How to Write a Book. I'll put a link to it in the description. But I bought a copy of this, and a friend of mine told me that this book was really helpful in the process of actually getting a book done and how you think about it. And the big idea of this book, and I'm going to put a link in the description of my notes on my website, but the whole purpose of this book was, every sentence supports an idea in a paragraph, and every paragraph supports an idea in a section, in a chapter. And the idea is being methodical when you write is a really big deal, and that can be really hard. And so one of the things is, I would say, have a strong conviction of your idea, meaning whatever you're writing, like what's the point of the book and who's your target. That's one thing I learned about going with publishers, was like talking to publishers. They really quickly like snuffed out like how narrow my audience was. I remember one said my first title for my book was Thinking Digitally as a Pastor, and one of the general editors said, so only pastors can read this? And essentially what he was saying is that you narrowed your audience from, 7 billion down to, let's say 1 million people. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't think about that way. So if you think about the potential books that, people can actually read, only pastors can read this just with my title. And so I go, oh no, I gotta change it. And I changed it to ministry leader, thinking beyond church as a church leader. I was like, that's too long. And then I'll talk more about this later, but like, this is why I changed my title to Online Church is Not the Answer. I wanted to be a little more provocative and, challenging, but sketch out the conviction. Like, why are you writing it? Do you have something to say? Is it compelling? Is it different? Remember, you're going to spend so much time, and you want to make sure it's actually an idea people want. So talk to people about it. I talked a lot with friends, like, would this be interesting? And, I would read other books in veins and go, I remember Dave Adamson, my friend who has Meta Church, a really good book. He wrote that. And actually I saw that come out and I was like, oh, I don't need to write a book anymore. He's going to nail it. And I remember he had a really good book, but my book was totally different, at least what I was thinking. So when I read it, I was like, okay, he's not talking about this. He's talking about this. I go, I still have something here to say. So I have a strong conviction on what you're going to write. The other thing is sketch out a table of contents. Now, this is something I did a long time ago. I think I did this in 2020. This is about 4 years ago. This is my first iteration. And you can see this is my working title at the time. Online, Offline Church, the internet isn't killing your church yet. This is funny. That was a really interesting title. But I wrote out like my goal. I even put some like goals around word count, 40,000. I learned 45,000 is kind of what a book is. If you look at most books, 45,000 is what's considered a book, and anything under 40,000 is kind of like just a pamphlet, kind of. Now, this isn't a big deal, but just understand like those are things. I actually got to 65,000 words and almost 200 pages. But I actually started to write this out, and what I did was I sketched out my chapters. And if you read my current version of my book, this is very different. I did concepts that I wanted in my book and stories I want to put in there. And then I just started writing. And I wrote about, let's see. I wrote about, yeah, this is about 12,000 words. I thought I had another version where I got about to 25,000 words, and I didn't like it. But what if you read my book, I have these concepts and some of this content in my current version of my book. But I would encourage you, just start sketching out a table of contents and then just start writing. Just start writing. Just start writing thoughts. And trust me, as you write and you go, you're going to learn a lot about the process. And I started to use Asana as like, I would just say, like, I literally created, I use Asana as my, like, you know, tracking goals, but I literally said, write chapter one, write chapter two, write chapter three. And I wrote it all on my Asana. And then I had goals where I put dates to it. And I started to write every morning. I tried to wake up at 6 a.m. and I wrote for anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes long every day. And I learned this from like listening to people. Malcolm Gladwell has a writing course on Masterclass that I went through. Also, Jim Collins, I've read some of his stuff about writing. He used to do this thing, or he does this thing where he writes whenever he has energy. So even if it's the middle of the night, he writes. Writing is it's a habit that you have to get good at, just like how you build muscle. You just have to push through and you get stronger at it. So my encouragement is just to start writing. And I just, I have an office space in my house that's actually in my garage space. And I would just come here and I would write for 30 minutes every morning. And I just started to write. And trust me, it was hard at first. And then after a couple weeks, it became very natural for me. And I started to set goals. And I would scrap things, but every time I would write more and more, I got more of an idea of what I was actually trying to accomplish. And what you start stacking days, weeks, and months, and you're like, oh my goodness, I have 20,000 words. How do I have 20,000 words already? And don't worry, you're gonna edit things down when you're writing. Don't worry about stuff being perfect. Just try to free flow it. Like just start writing. I would free flow like a chapter, and then I would go back and edit the chapter because I wanted to still be in the thought process, because I would build my thoughts chapter on chapter. So I did some editing after I completed a chapter, but I wouldn't get too heavy. Trust me, you're going to edit a million times. Then I would write again. And again, I wrote, no joke, probably for 3 years this way, mainly because I had another job and this was just something I was doing on the side. And I was still trying to figure out what my book was. I wasn't, even like a year in, I wasn't convinced it was a good book. And so I read a lot and listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I know the difference between when you start a book and it's bad and it's good, and when it's good. And I wanted to write a book that was good and was worth the investment. So I just put in the work, and really I think you are the person, like if you're proud of it, then I think no matter what people say, then you're going to be proud of it. So I just kept writing and I kept doing that. My goal early on was to get to 60,000 words. And so I would just write. And essentially I had broke down how many chapters that would be, how many words per chapter. And essentially I had that goal and I went over that goal. I think I'm at 65,000. And because I think I got to 70 or something, or 68, and then you edit a lot, and then you edit and you remove sections. You're told to expand. I was told to insert more stories into my book by a couple people, like friends that were editing it, and still I could have put more stories. And so, but it took about 3+ years to do this. And remember, I wrote 12,000, 20,000 words. I scrapped it, started over again. But I don't know, like every step of this was really helpful in my process, and I'm really proud of what came about. But and then just talk to people, put out ideas in other ways. This is why having a blog, like a website where you can share ideas and test out concepts, is really important. And I had been doing that since 2013. And so when I got to the writing, I kind of had an idea. And on top of it, I spoke a lot at church events and conferences, and I had given talks like this over the years. And so I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to write. I know some people actually, they give talks and they will actually like get it transcribed. So some people actually deliver, like, let's say if your book is 12 chapters, they'll develop 12 speeches and then have that transcribed, and then sometimes even hire a ghostwriter to like fill in the gaps. That's one idea that I didn't do, but it is an interesting thought to kind of test out. So editing process. Now I'm sorry, I'm getting some water here because I got a lot to say here. The editing process, I would edit as I went. I would complete a chapter and edit it back, mainly because I was still in that thought process and I wanted to keep like my thoughts and chapters together. So I would edit, I would kind of free flow a chapter and then edit it, and reread it. I mean, I reread my content so much, so much. Um, I had Grammarly, which you can pay, and I would use Grammarly for some suggestions and edits, and I did that many times throughout my writing. I also gave it to about six trusted friends for general thoughts, and some of them read it quickly, some read part of it, some sped read it. But I would get ideas. Like, I remember one of my good friends said, like, your first like half of your book is really strong. And what he was saying is like some maybe my later chapters kind of drifted off, and I took that feedback really well. And you hear that, and sometimes it's hard to take that feedback, but I thought it was really helpful. I also hired a general editor and a proofreader on a platform called Reasley, and this is a great tool, and essentially you can hire people here, and you track all the projects, and you learn a lot through this process. And I found my people just by recommendations, and I would search, and it's really helpful. And so, like, for example, in here you can see my projects. You can see they send you the different feedbacks and things around it. And I actually had to get Microsoft Word on my on my desktop at home, because the edits are tracked via using edits on Microsoft Word, and because I was doing everything in Google, and I bought this so I can track edits. And this is a little bit of a learning deal, like depending on how your editor works. It can be good and bad. I had to really learn how to use tracking edits on Google Microsoft Word, but I did a general editor who just did a general edit of everything. And there's like final proofers and then general editors. I hired a general editor, which costs more money because they're actually going to give you thoughts and concepts to kind of push it forward. My guy had actually worked on some big books, and he was super helpful. I really loved everything he gave. And literally they would pop up as notes, or like they would cross out stuff, and you can choose to accept or deny those edits. And then you have a final proofer, and ideally this is right before you go to print, and they just get everything, grammar, sentence structure, and all that. And this was a really great way. Now, if you have somebody in your friend group or your family group that's an editor, I know friends that have written books and like their spouse was an editor or something, you can do that too. I had a lot of words, like 65,000, and I really wanted it to be professionally edited, so I paid the money to do this. And this is probably an area I could have saved a little money, but I was willing to hire somebody. So I paid about $3,000, 2,000 I think for my general editor, and 1,000 for my proofreader. They were great. I'm not a great grammar, and I have a lot of spelling deals, and to have that resource was worth it to me. And this is an amazing tool. I really highly recommend if you're looking for a general editor and proofer. There's a couple different styles, but essentially you first hire a general editor, and then you have a proofer. And ideally with a proofer, you have something that you're about to upload to Amazon to kind of print, and then you give them like the layout, and they catch everything. Um, and throughout the process, you just edit it again. And I spent probably 6 months just editing. So maybe it was 2.5 years of writing, or almost 3 years, and then 6 months of just editing. And I would just read it over and over, and I would do it in chunks. Like I would sometimes start at the front and go all the way to the end, and then I would start at the end and read it backwards. I read my book when it was already done so many times. I was sick of it. Like I was completely sick of the book. They actually sometimes suggest writing something and put it in a drawer for a season and coming back to it, because sometimes your brain will fill in gaps, and then somebody else will be like, that doesn't make sense. But the farther you get away from it and revisit it, the more helpful it is in editing. But editing can be really really hard, and so that's all I gotta say. Editing's hard, but it's really needed. And so this is where you get discouraged, like, will this ever come out? Will I ever be done with this thing? This is the stage of editing. It's just, I found writing and promoting the book a lot of fun. When I got to editing, I was just done. It felt like work, but you need to do that. You need to make sure you don't catch any error. And if you catch an error in my book now, I'd be so mad, because I spent so much time and money editing it. Now, on created an audio version, this is something that that I'll talk more about. getting on Amazon here in a second, but I'm sorry, I like totally brain froze there because I was thinking something. But essentially, I'm having like flashbacks of of doing all this. Now, to actually create the audio version, and I'll talk a little bit about how you do that. But what's amazing about this now is there are so many amazing resources. I really wanted to create an audiobook. I've 40% of the time or 50% of the time, the books I go through, I'm doing in audio, and I wanted to be on Audible. And so I decided I'm going to do my own audio, and I'll put links in the description. This is the video I watched. Yes, you can record your own audiobook, where they talk about how to record it, your setup, and then also how to edit this. This is record and edit. This is another guy that I read how to record and edit. And it's work. It's definitely, I felt like I was in school learning how to, design on Adobe Photoshop or something. But it's not that hard. And essentially, all you need to figure out is how to record your audio. And I recorded using a Shure mic. I bought one of these. And I had one of these before, so this wasn't a new purchase. I already had this. This is an expensive mic. It's about $250, but you can do cheaper versions. But I already had this in my office setup, and then I bought a mic shield, which this was like $10. I bought this for this only, and I haven't used it since. And essentially, I set up a closet in my main closet, and I recorded everything in GarageBand. I learned how to record it, and it took me about 3 weeks to record, and I would record a certain amount. Like I try to do like a certain amount every day without, getting tired. And it's a lot of work, and there's a lot of things you have to learn. You have to learn about, making sure you don't mess up words, that you pronounce words right, your breathing's okay. Those videos unpack all that. One of the things I learned, like a small thing that was a huge thing, I initially recorded a chapter as a sample, and then I tried to edit it and then listen to it with headphones in, and I heard all these like drops. It would be like talking and then drops. I learned that when you cut out, like I edited out all my breaths on the edit, that sample edit, and when you go from noise to nothing, it sounds terrible in headphones. And you want to listen to everything with headphones because that's how people are going to listen to your book, and you can just hear the audio drops in between the edits. And I learned that you record a little bit of no noise in your space, and then you fill in with GarageBand. You do copy and paste, and you fill in the drops with just no noise, and that smooths it out a ton. There's a lot of settings in GarageBand that you have to learn. These guys unpack that. I will say, first, find whoever's going to do your audio mastering of your file. Talk to every sound engineer that you can. You can also hire somebody on ACX, which I'll talk about. But I found a friend that had actually published some audiobooks and done it, and I hired him. And it was actually because I did all the recording and editing, which took so much time. Mastering the files was only $600. It wasn't that expensive, but I did all the editing, and that would have cost 5 times more if I would have hired somebody to edit the files, because it was a lot of time to edit. If my book is, I don't know, 5 hours long or something like that, it's less than that. It's so much editing. You have to listen to everything, and you have to re-listen to it. I would edit and re-listen to it, but you can do it. You can hire somebody, and ACX is where I published my audiobook, but you can find talent. This is actually the easiest way to do it. You can go to Find, and you can hire people, and they give you the rates, and they can master and do all that for you. And this is the best way to do it. If you have the resources, just hire somebody to do it that you like their voice. They know all the settings with ACX and Audible and so forth. I had to learn this all myself, and I saved myself a ton of money, but I also spent all the work. Again, if you have a publisher, they do this all for you. But yeah, a lot of work. I will say that, and I'll talk about this at the end, I don't know if I haven't made my money back on this investment. I think my Audible version is more of my book can last longer. I think it's going to be around a lot longer because there's an audio version. And I think in the next 5 to 10 years, my audiobook will perform better as time goes. So this is me more betting on the future, but you definitely can record your own audio. Check out these links to kind of learn how to do it. It's work, but you definitely can do it with like an iMac and GarageBand and a nice mic. It's not, like I was just in my closet, and I would just put my clothes around me to dampen the sound, and I recorded and I learned how to edit, and Took so much work. I remember one weekend my wife went with some of her friends and took our kids, and they were gone for 3 days, and all I did was record my audiobook. And I would record for an hour, watch something so my throat could kind of regain its strength, and then I would record again. And I literally recorded probably for like the whole weekend. That's what I did while they were gone. But yeah, a lot of work. Okay, design title process. Now, this is a big one. You have to design your book so it's compelling to read. So I hired a friend. Obviously, I'm a follower of Jesus, and so in my case, I have a bunch of friends that do design work for churches. This is one. He designed. Chris Tripudi designed my cover. He has a creative agency called Creative Church. They don't just do Christian stuff, so you can check them out. But I really liked it. He did all my cover and design graphs and tables in my book. I had a bunch of them. Early on when I was working on my book, I had some design work that I just created in like Canva or Microsoft Word or something. Actually, I think I used draw.io. Is it draw.io? I think it's it. Yeah. This is like a tool that you can you can create designs. And I did a lot of designs early this way. And it's just you can do all sorts of stuff. And so I designed stuff on this, and then I sent it to him to design. And I had about 18 stuff like this that I inserted into my book. Actually, I have a URL that I created for this. So if people are doing the audio, they can get all my footnotes. And these are all the designs. This design, which I didn't design, a designer designed, but there's a lot of these graphs that I did. And so he designed that and my cover. One of the things just to think about in your design process is just like YouTube, people pick a book on the title and the image. The question is, will it pop? Think about the wording, the colors, the problem your book solves with the title. One of the things is the harsh reality is people would discover your book in feeds like this. So this is searching for my book. How does my cover pop? Here, the title. Here's my audio version. What does it look like? And so we thought a lot about this. And my friend Chris, he's a really good designer. Even with my title, I changed my title to Online Offline Church or Thinking Digitally as a Pastor because I was like, I don't think that's helpful. And I really thought about this. And this is more like I'm more of a strategist, like marketer. And so this is something I spent a lot of time with. I actually tweeted a couple times different ideas. And essentially, I really wanted this idea that there's a bunch of people that all follow me that know that I'm pro online church and I believe churches should use more digital strategy. And I don't see it as an evil thing. But how do I convince everyone else? And so I thought about this idea. Online church is not the answer beyond just streaming church to hybrid discipleship. And my friend came up with this idea of put online church is the answer and put red tape. And he actually got some tape and he photocopied this or copied it in, and he did this knot. And we kind of played with this knot language to pop so that it would really show up. And the idea is that I can see some church person that is kind of anti-technology. Online church, yeah, online church is not the answer. And then they read it and they're like, oh, wow, I can use online and digital tools and technology at my church. And kind of we're playing with this idea that you can rip off the tape and it's online church is the answer. And so, but think a lot about your title and your cover. Amazon KDP, and I'll show this, has some book design features that you can use. I'm going to tell you, just go on 99 Designs or Fiverr or somewhere and hire a designer to design something. Now, what's tricky is that they have to be able to design it in the way, if you're going to do a printed copy, it has to be, one of the trickiest part is the binding has to be a certain size, and Amazon gives you all those. But I would encourage you, go the extra mile and design something amazing. Again, if you go, for example, if I just go, I'll do my audio. If I just go to let's just say my library, and just think about this. These are books that I've read recently. And if you look at the titles and the image, there's so much work into this, Die with Zero. This is a book that somebody gifted me. I haven't read it fully yet, but Dopamine Nation. I mean, think about this. Clay Scargins, he actually wrote an endorsement for my book. I was very kind that Clay did that. But again, think about my own book. Think a lot about the title and the image because again, you can spend all the time in the world, but just understand this is how people will come to discover your book, and this image has to pop, just like a YouTube thumbnail image. So again, think a lot about this. Okay, so let's talk about getting on Amazon and other platforms. This is something that's really cool, is that you can get on Amazon print on demand, KDP, and you pretty much upload your manuscript. They have all the formatting options. You upload a cover. It goes through like a process, and essentially they will print your book on demand. You don't have to pay any fees every month. They will just print it when somebody orders a book. And this is amazing. And so I'm going to just show you this. It's very easy. You just go to KDP, you go through it, and you're going to go into kind of your book. I actually at one point had a book that I did years ago. This was a long time ago. But essentially, I'll show you in my view. I'm going to edit this. I'm not actually going to do this. I spent so much time in here, like, because what you do is that like you set it all up, you see a preview, and then you have to order a copy, and then it takes like 5 days for them to print to send you, and then you see if it's right. But essentially what you do in here is you can see, this is for the Kindle. Oh yeah, let's do this. So you create a book here, and you can get, I actually bought my own ISBN through a site. If you're only publishing on Amazon, they will assign you one for free, but I bought one because I was going to publish a couple different. You pick the color, the dimensions. I did 6x9. Go grab your favorite book and just measure. 6x9 is like the default. No bleed. Again, watch videos on how to learn about this. There's a lot of tutorials on self-publishing that you can kind of go through the details, the nerdiness of this. You upload a manuscript, which is just, in this case, I exported my manuscript from Microsoft Word as a PDF, so it locks formatting, and then you have a cover, and they actually like help you with this layout, and you can see it's printed as a full page, and you upload, and there's like special designs, and this is why you need to find somebody, and they have something called a cover calculator where you do like, okay, mine's a paperback, black and white. I'm gonna do cream, left to right, inches. Mine is 6x9, and then you say like 190 pages, let's say. And then this is how you have to lay it out. And the tricky part is if you have color in the spine, it could bleed. And one of the things I did find is printing on demand is not perfect, and every other book can print a little different. And so sometimes people order my book and this red bind bleeds a little bit to the right or to the left, and it kind of drives me crazy. It's on Amazon. It's just part of it. It's amazing that you can do this with no money. But essentially, I would have probably redesigned I would have my binding be the same color, so I wouldn't have that issue. And then you pick a cost or whatever, and then you print. And then they will tell you, like, based off of how much your book is, how much the cost is. What's funny is this, like my book, I'll just tell you, like I sell it for $18. I sold it for $12 for the first 2 months just to sell more books. But it's funny because I sell my book for $8, but I only get like $6 on average for my book or something. Maybe some of that's padded because I sold some books in other ways, but it's funny. Like I don't make a lot of money. I don't make this per book, but KDP is an amazing resource. You just go and you can upload stuff, and it really is a really helpful resource, and then you can list different prices for different areas, and then you publish, and it could take, again, you're probably going to set up everything, and then you're going to have to, and then you're going to do a lot of like order a proof and then see. But I'll just show you, like, for example, in there, this is where you're going to set up this image, the back. You're going to upload samples, a reading sample, an audio sample. You actually create one file just as an audio sample. You'll do this. Like one of the things is here's the title, and then I like bolded like some of my endorsements I got, and I put an overview of my chapters. And then this a bunch of other stuff. And then you can create like an author profile too, which is all in there and which is super helpful. There's a lot of other things you can do here. And then also, like, just so you know, like Apple Books was pretty easy. You go to iTunes, it's iTunes Connect.apple creating. This is actually because you're doing Apple Books is just ebook and audio. I just uploaded an ebook and I used ACX to do my audio. This was actually super easy. It was just uploading the format, and you just make sure everything looks right. I did put it on Barnes and Noble for their ebook, the Nook. Spoiler, I haven't sold a single copy on here, but I did it. It didn't take me that much extra time. I also did Google Books. Once you have your book, you can upload it to a couple different places pretty easy. I have had 3 people buy it here, which I thought was interesting. Google Books is super confusing, I will say. And then lastly, I have my own website. I already have my own Squarespace site that I've had for years, and I get a good enough traffic on it. So I created if you go on my homepage, I have my book, and this is linked everywhere, and this just has an overview. I created some graphics using Canva and some easy links for people to get it. And then I sold, I have a store here where you can buy, for example, there's a couple ways you can get to it, but here's the store. I just set this up in Squarespace as digital items, and I created graphics. So you can buy just the PDF for $9.99. You can do a bundle for the PDF and the audiobook for $14.99. And what's cool about this, because it's on Squarespace, I keep 95% of this profit. So I've sold about 50 books here, and I kept most of the profit. This is by far your own store is your best profit. Like having your own website and selling it is probably you can make the maximum amount of profit. I also sold some bundles for fun, and I've had 2 people order this one and 2 people order this one. And this is one of those things, like, I know people will share my PDFs and my audio, but I wanted to buy it for teams, and I just discounted it. And it's been fun that people actually bought these. And it's a way like, hey, if you're going to share my audiobook with all your volunteers, like, at least let me know, and I'll give you some ways to buy it in an affordable way. And so this is actually a really easy way. You have to have a Squarespace site. This is already something I pay for, and so it wasn't that much. I already had an account, so it didn't cost me any extra to do this. But KDP is how to do it. It's pretty easy once you have your writing done, your editing done, your design work. The actual publishing process is pretty easy. It's just about getting everything uploaded, and you just look at your proofs and you test it. Getting on Audible is super easy too after you've done all the work. ACX is the platform I use. I only have my audio on Audible and Apple. And essentially, when you go here, you go to your projects, and you can see essentially what you do is your ISPN, which is your number. You put in your ISPN and you claim it. And so you publish it first on Amazon, and then you link it with the ISPN number. And so this allows you to kind of link this account to your Amazon account. And you pretty much you upload it every chapter. You can see my book is 5 hours, 28 minutes, and you create chapters based off of the title. And then you have to upload a sample. And then essentially they associate this with, so the reason why, if I go to my Amazon, the reason this Audible version is not hosted on Amazon directly, it's linked with my ACX account. And so this is, again, you can see it here, it's linked, but I claim it with my ISBN number. And so again, I had to create my own graphic, to be this design. But once I had the audio files, using ACX is great. The only thing with Audible is that I have found that they keep a lot more of the cut ACX because they obviously are providing more of a service, I would say, whatever. But I thought I would make more money because my Audible is actually more money and I actually get less back per sell. I also sold an Audible version. I just provided a Audible version on my website as well. And all I did was I have like a Google Drive. What I did was I created a zip file with my PDF and all the Audibles. And then on Squarespace, when you download it, you have a one-time download and it's like in a zip file. And so, yeah, but I'm very proud that I have an Audible. I still this is one of those things when I think about the amount of work I put in. I haven't gotten my return for my Audible Like, to be honest, I haven't sold that many as I thought I would, but I think long term it will reap benefits. But I'm very just proud that I actually was able to pull this off on my own. Okay, a couple final things. So, launching your book and marketing. This is a big deal. So, what can happen naturally is you put in all the work, you grind it out. Maybe you did it in 8 months, or or you're somebody like me, a slow writer, processor, and it took 3.5 years. You can just be like, you put it out there. But honestly, you have to think about marketing in a very direct way. And this is one of those areas, like with your recommendations, people that are respected in your area, your field, the topic. If there's any way to build relationships, get people. You can see on my book, um, I I went to friends, and I went to my old pastor. He's a good person to have recommend your book because he's one of the best-selling authors ever. I went to one of my friends, Will Mancini, who I've done a lot of work with, and I've gotten to know Will. And I asked him, this Brady Shearer, he's kind of a respected person in the space, and then a bunch of other people. And essentially, I just slowly went through all these, and I just put in the work to kind of get feedback and recommendations. One of my friends told me that they have a book in Christian space, and they said I would have sold a lot more books if I would have put Pastor Rick Warren's recommendation on the book cover. And I told them I didn't. I totally agree, I would have, but I didn't have that type of relationship with Rick. And he had, I'm not going to say who, but he had somebody on his cover, and he said he thinks 90% of the people buy his book just because they think he wrote it. And so this is one of those marketing things where you don't want to think about this as a writer, but you have to think about the marketing of your book. This is why your title, your design, all these things are super important as you're thinking about it. So pick a launch date, 60, 90 days. So like get done with your book and then put in the extra 30 days, 45 days into actually like designing a marketing plan. Think about what you're going to do. And I did this. If you go on all my socials, I don't have like this huge following, but if you go on my Instagram, you're going to see me like, this is a funny one. I'm using my daughter. This is when I first got my book. My like one of my first proofs, and I got my daughter, opening it, was just like I think I cried when they opened this, because I just didn't even believe it was done. But I went through this, and this is my first proof, and so I put that in. I I did interviews with friends. This is one of my friend Nate, one of the early online pastors at a big church in Texas. This is Will Mancini. We did an interview. I did content breakdown. Like I used Instagram to do this, and I just promoted my book. And you can feel like, oh my goodness, you are promoting like crazy, but understand, and this is like my last point, but somebody told me if you won't promote your book, nobody will. And that's so true. I called in every favor. If you go like on my website a couple weeks ago, you can see I'm on podcasts constantly. I'm on so many podcasts. I asked Brady, like, I'm not like super close with Brady at all. And I I text him, and I don't like doing this, but I'm like, Brady, is there any way I can be on your pod? And you're gonna hear no from people. I remember when I asked a couple people to write endorsements, like people told me no, very kindly, like respected people with influence, like they're like no, and I totally get it, but I had to at least ask. And so I went on so many podcasts, and to be honest, I'm still going on podcasts because I'm trying to do it. And short form content, you're gonna see this. Like I started to upload to YouTube stuff from my book. I did all sorts of stuff. I'll highlight this tool. I would go on podcast, and then I would use a tool called Descript, and you can upload videos there, and they'll create short form content with captions. I put in all this work. I re-engage. I don't use TikTok. I re-engage TikTok because just because like I wanted my book to be found, and I had to do this. And I think it's hard. It's hard work promoting your book, but you got to be a little shameless with it if it's going to get picked up. But you have to put in the work. Once you like do all the hard work, buy yourself another 30, 60 days of actually putting together a marketing plan, building up a launch date, promoting it. Trust me. One of the things with Amazon right now is that there's a little limitation with with pre-sales. You only can do it with audio. I mean, with ebooks, not your physical book or audio. So like I was a little bummed on those features. I hope in the coming years that some of the features of pre-sales was a big deal, because a lot of times people will build up for a launch date to sell books, and then on the day one all the sales will process, and then that allows you to be like a bestseller. I wasn't going to be a bestseller on my first week, but I did get best new seller when my book first published in the first couple of weeks, which was really good. And that's really important. Like if you can get some of those tags on Amazon, you get more recommended long term. Okay, let's talk about cost. I laid it out here, just being honest, like total cost for me to write my own book, self-published, book proposal, $500, book editing, $2,400, proof editing, $1,000, audio mastering, $600, cover design, $750. Now, my friend did design this, so this is a little cheaper, and I did tip him. I think I tipped him like $250. He was only gonna do it for $500, and I felt bad. He put in so much work. I'm getting him at a discount. I bought my own ISBN, which that is something you have to do if you're going to be on other platforms. And then I spent about $369 on $67 on ads. Now, I don't spend a lot on ads. I do have something I would recommend. You can pay for an ongoing ad where you only pay for the money if somebody buys it. And so I have an ad where like these are like, for example, the idea is somebody, and you actually pick books, and you can target people who look at this book. Like, let's say this is James White's book. It's kind of in the same vein of my book. It's not like my book, but you can see, look, this ad right here, I'm paying to target people who search for this book, and I only get charged if people click on it. And I would say if you put in the money in your part of your book, pay for that ad, because you only get charged for people who actually click on it. And I make more money. I only spend, it's not a high traffic thing, and I make money on those ads, and I don't spend a lot. It might be $40 a month, but I make money on my book. And so in total, my book cost total to do my own audio, my writing, all this, $5,853.20. That's how much it cost me. I remember at one point in the process, I was like, I think this is gonna work. I hope people can do this. And I actually early on, I actually guessed. When the 2 or 3 publishers said no to me early on, I was trying to figure out, like, how many books do I got to sell to break even? And I kind of had run the numbers. Like, I think I can publish my own book for $5,000. And I ran the numbers, and I was like, I think I need to sell like 800 books in order to break even. I think that was kind of the idea. And I was like, I had an email list of over 1,000 people on my own like private website. And with my connection, I was like, I think I can sell like 800, 1,000 books on my own without, like, I think I can do that. And so I know I can break even. And so, but as I spent more money, I remember I'm kind of frugal. And so as I spent money here, I was like, oh my goodness, this is so much money. Is this going to make sense? Okay. And so, okay, total sales breakdown for the first 6 months. So this is 6 months from August 2024 to February 2025 at 6 months. On Amazon, I've sold 552 books, 125 ebooks, 427 physical books. I will say, just like a quick tip, this is kind of a fun thing. When you go to books, this is something I learned after publishing. You can go down here and they actually will show you the ranking. So look, I'm 641,000 in the world. Now, what's interesting is I have found this ranking it's related to, I think it's related to shipping, like when a book ships. And so, for example, if I go into my my reports on, this is for Amazon, this is just Amazon, I sold 1 book today. And I actually made a little bit less. This is an estimation. I made a little less on this. So I bet this is in a region where it's a little bit more expensive. And what happens is, when I sell a book or two, this will drop down under 200,000. And so what's interesting is you can, like, I was just looking at this. I actually know, I can know, like, okay, I sell a book today. That means probably in the next 8 hours, this is going to drop to under 200,000. And then when this drops to, like, under 100,000, I'm like, oh, I sold a couple books. And so this is like, for example, this is just for February so far. And so you can see how much money I made and how many books. And so this changes every 3 to 4 hours. And then you can do the same thing on Audible. You can click Audible and it will give you a different ranking. So look, there's not that many books, so I always rank a little higher on Audible. And then obviously Kindle. And so this is kind of a fun thing. Like you can play, like here, I'll play, I'll be dirty right now. I'll look at my friend Neil's book. So this book is very old. So Neil's would say, he talks about MySpace in this book. So he always jokes with this. He can't believe this book is still out there. But you can see like his book is it's almost 5 million in the world. He hasn't sold a book in a while. But it's funny. There was somebody who was speaking at my church recently and he had a book and I went and because I've self-published and I know some of this, I went and his book was like not doing as good. And I knew I was selling more books than him. This is like the prideful side of you, but it is really fun to kind of watch this. Audible, audio on Apple Books and Audible, I've sold 111. ACX is not an amazing report feature. They update every 24 hours or every 21 hours. So like I've only sold 4 audio this month. But then like if I go in my earnings section, like they only give me PDFs and stuff and it takes like a month and a half for me to get my full numbers, which I don't love. But yeah, I'm surprised how many physical books I sold to audio. I thought it would be way more. Some of this has to do with probably just the launch and friends supporting and stuff. I think long-term this will actually go up. Barnes & Noble, 0. Google Books, 3. I've sold about 50 books on my website, like 24 units. And then, yeah, it's because I sold package deals. And then special order. I spoke at a conference. They bought about 300 books for a conference. Everybody in the conference got a book. I had another friend buy 50 books, which I gave him actually at cost. I didn't really make money from that because he was just promoting my book. And then I did a giveaway with a friend and I bought 10 books for them. I can buy on, just so you know, you get, you're allowed to get 1,000 author copies. And what you do is you get 1,000 author copies at a very discount. Like so my book sells for $18. I can get an author copy for like $4 a book. And essentially I pay for shipping. And so for example, like I might like this conference, like they wanted to buy 300 books. I think I sold it to them for $8 a book. So they saved a bunch of money, but I made my same return or something. And so you can do that. I only get 1,000 of those. I don't like doing that because I don't get ranked for it. But obviously if there's a big sale, like that's something I can do. And yeah. And then so total sales, this is how many in the first 6 months. Just this, I've sold 1,076 books. I'm told the average person only sells like self-published, like maybe 250 copies. And really most people are only selling 100 copies. So over almost 1,100 books I've been told is very good. Just a little bit of an insight of the numbers. 14% ebook, 73% physical, and 13% Audible. I would think that this would be way more. But I think because of like that conference and so forth, I think this will change over the next 6 months, but we'll see. But I found that interesting. Okay, breakdown. Total profit breakdown for the first 6 months. It cost me $5,800. Sales, 6,600, almost 6,700. I did speak at an event for my book, and they paid me $1,000 speaker fee. So I'm including in that because I wouldn't have done this event if I didn't have a book. One of the things you'll notice is people speak a lot at events just to promote their book, and that's just part of the grind. Malcolm Gladwell said his first book, he was a famous New Yorker writer, but to promote his book, he spoke at everything for 2.5 years, and it wasn't until like the 2.5 year that the book actually took off. And if you just look at speaking circuits, this is very true in Christian spaces. I know it's true in other. Most of the time, they're just going to things to promote their book because maybe the conference will buy a copy, and so sometimes they won't pay you, or they'll pay you a small amount and then they'll buy a copy. This conference was kind of in my vein, so I wanted to go regardless. I do not go to conferences, but this kind of aligned. So I'm including that in my return because it's part of my book sales. And if I wanted to make more money, I would speak at more things. Now, I have a job and a family and I can't speak at stuff regularly. So this is not something I plan on doing. I might speak at like 2 a year if I have opportunities, but it's part of it. So just understand if you want to promote your book more, you might need to speak at everything. The cool thing now is you can just go on every podcast that you can think of to kind of do some of this. You may not get paid that, but it's the reality. So total profit for the first 6 months, I made $824. How crazy is that? All that work, 3.5 years, and I've only made $824. Now, the question is, I'm in profit mode now. Everything I make now is profit. So as you can see, I don't know how my book's going to do, but like this month, like if next month I just make another 700 and like, let's just say every month I make $700, times that, that's $8,400 a year. Now, obviously that assumes the book continues to do well. It's worth it, but that's the question. My book has held steady in sales. I'm still selling 100 books a month. So I'm curious what will happen. I knew like books either pop or they die or they kind of get handed off. And I believe my book is one of those books that can be handed off. There are some really compelling thoughts and ideas that people will recommend it. And it might take, it's going to take 6 to 12 months for it to kind of saturate. Or if it dies, it dies. The good news is that I'm super proud of my book. I've already made $824, and I think it will continue to do well. One of the things I'm really praying for is that it does well enough that it gets a bestseller tag in Amazon, so it gets promoted more. I'm under the impression I have to sell near 4,000 to 5,000 to get that, but that part I'm not fully aware of because I got the new seller, like bestseller tag early on. That dropped, and so anyways, just a little perspective. My book sells for $18. I get about $6.26 on average for physical books. That's my take home. About $20 of audio on average. I'm only getting this, which is a big, like ACX takes a huge cut of that, which is crazy. Because I think they pay Amazon and they get a cut. So this is like, again, this is one of those things like I think Audible is worth it long term, but this is kind of sucks. I thought I would make more per audio. Maybe that will change. And then my ebook, I sell it for 10 and I make a lot from that, 663. And then my website, Squarespace only charges a fee and a listing fee. So like if it sells for $10, I get 9, like 50. So that's really good. So that's my return, my profit loss. I'm very proud of it. I'm very glad. So some final tips. Write something that you'd be proud of at the end. I mean, this is a no-brainer. It's a lot of time and investment, and only do it if you feel it's worth it. Start writing without an end goal. Just start daily writing, and just trust me, as you get into that rhythm, if you do it every day, you create some tasks just to hit certain word limits, word counts, weekly, monthly, I think it will start to make sense. The fog will start to kind of fade. So don't worry if you're like, I don't really know. Just start writing, and trust me, it will start to make sense as you grind through. Think a lot about what will make your book different. Do a lot of research in your category on Amazon and Audible and just kind of see what's out there and maybe where your space is. I've read 99% of the books in my category, and I know why and my book is different because I've read them all. Enjoy the process. It's the classic, it's the journey, not the destination. I'm very proud of what I wrote, and I also kind of miss. I really enjoyed the process of like I'm writing something, and it wasn't like I was just writing something that. I had some friends who wrote ebooks that were like 20 pages long, and they're like, "Oh, I wrote something too," and I'm like, not that I was trying to be arrogant, but like I knew I was writing something that was bigger, and I felt better, because I invested 3.5 years and almost $6,000 into it. Like it wasn't just this ebook thing. It was actually, I wanted it to be something I could be proud of. And again, that could be a good strategy too. I have friends that have done that, and it's just, there's a difference between like an ebook and an actual book. And some of that has to do with page counts, but just think about that. You can also use, I have another friend that used AI to write a book, and you could just tell the difference between something that's worth reading and something that's kind of like a summary of things. And again, all are valid strategy. It just depends on what you wanted. I wanted to write something that can kind of stand more the test of time. So I was willing to put in a lot more energy into it. And then lastly, I would say, please please support your friends who write books by buying their book. Don't just ask for a free copy. This is one of the things that drives me crazy. I spent so much time on my book, and I remember I harassed my boss on this at the time. He's not my boss now, but he kept harassing me that I didn't give him a free copy. And I didn't want to give him a free copy because it was going to cost me $5 to order a book. And I knew he wasn't going to read it. And he was just asking me for a book. And what annoyed me was he had written a bunch of books and he knows how big of a deal it is to give away free books. And him just buying my book would meant so much to me. So I would encourage you, like if you have friends or family members that have books, buy them. I had so many friends and family members buy books and show me that. And it was so kind, especially when they wrote reviews. I remember I had a friend that I knew from ministry back in the day, and he wrote a book and I bought the book. I didn't even read it because I didn't want to read it, but I just wanted to support him. And I try to support all my friends who write books now because I know how hard this is. Trust me, it's a great way to support people. Well, I hope that video was encouraging and it gave you some perspective and maybe some vision and energy towards writing your own book. I believe anybody can write a book and get it self-published now. And the resources at our fingertips are amazing. And I'm praying, no matter where you're at on the spectrum with God or what you believe, I'm praying you're going to need prayer in this journey because it's a lot of, it could feel like a lot of lonely nights where, why did I do this? But if you keep pushing, you keep grinding, and you write something you're proud of, you know, I know it's going to be worth it. And I know for me, maybe I haven't made a ton of money in the first 6 months, but I think in the long run, it's going to do me really well. So I'm glad I put in the time and the resources into writing, especially because I had a strong conviction around what I should write. And so you can drop any questions down in the comments on this video on YouTube. Also, make sure you go to my description. There's a link to my website to a bunch of the things I've referenced throughout this video, like proposals and different resources that you can dive into. I went the extra mile really because I want people that are starting this writing journey to have all their questions answered, and I had to go to a lot of different resources, so I tried to compile everything that I found helpful in self-publishing and creating my own audiobook, as well as just throwing it out there. Buy a copy of my book. Even if you don't go to church, maybe this is something you can buy just to say, hey, thanks for putting this video together. It means a lot. As you will go on this journey, somebody buying your book means a lot. And so buy that, write a good review, maybe give it to somebody you know that serves in church as part of a church. Well, I'm praying for your writing process. If you got anything else, drop it in the comments, but I'm praying that you get going on your writing, and maybe when you publish your book, drop it in the comments and let me see it. I would love to know about it.